Victoria Hale didn't shout. She never had to. She lifted one finger toward the quiet man in the plain navy jacket, and two security guards moved on him like he was a threat to the entire floor. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply picked up his worn leather folder and walked out, and in that same leather folder sat a $400 million promise that was the only thing standing between Evercrest Technologies and its grave. She had 90 days of cash left in the bank, and she had just thrown away her last lifeline over a cheap pair of shoes. Before we go on, drop the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. And if stories about character, second chances, and the people we underestimate mean something to you, subscribe and stay with me, because what this woman learns over the next hour is going to sit with you long after the video ends. Victoria Hale had thrown people out of rooms before. She was good at it. It was, if she was being honest with herself in the rare quiet moments she allowed, one of the things she was best at. She could clear a boardroom with a look. She could end a man's career with a sentence delivered in a flat, bored tone, the same tone she used to order coffee. In 19 years of climbing, clawing, and outworking every person who ever doubted her, Victoria had learned one lesson above all the others. The person who controls the room controls the outcome. And Victoria always controlled the room. So when Nathan Whitmore walked into her private conference room on the morning of March the 11th, wearing a navy jacket that looked like it came off a department store rack and shoes that had clearly been resoled at least once, Victoria did what she always did. She sized him up in under 2 seconds. And she decided he did not belong. Can I help you, she said. The words came out cold. Not curious. Not confused. Cold. The way you'd speak to a man who'd wandered onto the wrong floor looking for the restroom. Nathan stopped a few feet inside the doorway. He had a calm about him, the kind of stillness that most people in Victoria's world didn't have. Everyone she knew was always moving, always performing, always leaning forward to grab the next thing. This man just stood there, holding an old leather folder against his side. Victoria Hale, he asked. That's the name on the door. Nathan Whitmore. He took a step forward and extended his hand across the polished table. We had a meeting scheduled for 9 o'clock. About the investment. Victoria did not take his hand. She let it hang there in the air between them for one long, deliberate second, and then two, and then she watched him quietly lower it back to his side. She'd done that on purpose. It was a small cruelty, the refused handshake, but it sent a message faster than any words could. It told a man exactly where he stood. The investment, she repeated. Yes, the $400 million investment. That's the one. Victoria almost laughed. She glanced across the table at her assistant, Rachel Collins, who was seated near the window with a tablet in her lap and a strange, uncertain look on her face. Then she glanced at the two junior executives seated to her right, both of whom had gone very still, the way people go still when they can feel a storm coming, and they don't want to be the thing it lands on. Rachel, Victoria said without taking her eyes off Nathan. Did you approve this appointment? Rachel opened her mouth. It came through the main office. It was confirmed 3 weeks. That's not what I asked. I asked if you approved it. No. Then who let this man onto the executive floor? The room got quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. Nathan Whitmore stood at the end of the table and watched the whole thing unfold, and to anyone paying attention, and one person in that room was paying very close attention, the most remarkable thing about him was that he didn't flinch. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't scrambling to prove himself. He just watched Victoria the way a patient man watches a storm he's seen 100 times before, waiting for it to pass. Nathan said, and his voice was even. There's no confusion. My office confirmed this meeting on the 17th of last month. I flew in this morning specifically for it. I understand your company is in a difficult position, and I've spent the better part of a year studying it. I'd like to help. If you'll give me 20 minutes, I think you'll... Stop. Victoria held up one hand. She leaned back in her chair. And something in her posture shifted, a settling. A comfort. The body language of a predator who has decided the situation is fully under her control. She looked at Nathan Whitmore's jacket. She looked at his shoes. She looked at that old leather folder tucked under his arm. And in her mind a story assembled itself. Quickly and confidently. The way stories always did for Victoria Hale. Con artist, she thought. Some small-time nobody who read an article about our troubles and thought he'd walk in off the street and talk his way into a room he'd never earn. Because Victoria knew what a serious investor looked like. She'd sat across from 100 of them. They arrived in suits that cost more than most people's cars. They came with an entourage, an analyst, a lawyer, a young associate to carry the bags. They wore watches that told you their net worth before they said a single word. They performed wealth. Because in Victoria's world, wealth was a performance. And the men who had it were never shy about letting you see it. This man had none of that. This man looked like he'd just dropped a kid off at school. Let me tell you what I think is happening here, Victoria said. And now there was a thin, sharp smile on her lips. I think you read about Evercrest. I think you saw that we've had a rough couple of quarters. And I think you decided to try your luck. Maybe you thought a struggling company means a desperate CEO. Maybe you thought I'd be so grateful for any attention that I wouldn't ask questions. That's not. I'm still talking. Nathan closed his mouth. This is a meeting for executives and investors, Victoria went on. Serious people. People who move real capital. And I have exactly 1 week to close a deal that determines whether 4,000 people keep their jobs. So I do not have 20 minutes for a man who walked in here in 10-year-old shoes to tell me he'd like to help. The word help came out of her mouth like something she'd scraped off the bottom of it. And here is the part that mattered. Here is the part that Victoria Hale would replay in her mind 1,000 times over the coming weeks, lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at her ceiling. Nathan Whitmore didn't get angry. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't puff up his chest and start listing his accomplishments the way a smaller man would have. He didn't slap a business card on the table and demand she look at it. He simply tilted his head slightly and looked at her, really looked at her, and what was in his eyes was not rage. It was disappointment. And something worse than disappointment. Recognition. He had seen this before. He'd seen it many, many times. And the look on his face said so. Ms. Hale, Nathan said quietly. I'm going to ask you one question. And then, if you'd like, I'll leave and I won't waste any more of your time. Are you turning down this meeting because of something I said, or because of what I'm wearing? The room held its breath. It was a fair question. It was in fact the only question that mattered. And a wiser person, a more careful person, a person with even 1 ounce of humility left in her, might have paused at that moment. Might have felt the floor shift just slightly beneath her feet. Might have thought, wait. But Victoria Hale had not built her career on pausing. Rachel, she said. Call security. Rachel didn't move. Victoria minus. Call security. For a moment, nothing happened. The 2 junior executives stared at the table like it held the secrets of the universe. Rachel's hand hovered over the tablet, and Nathan Whitmore stood there, still holding his folder, watching a woman detonate her own future in real time and not even knowing she'd lit the fuse. Then Rachel, her face pale, picked up the phone. The security who arrived was named Marcus. He was a big man, mid-40s, ex-military, and he'd worked the front desk of the Evercrest Tower for 6 years. He was not a cruel man. He did not enjoy this part of the job. When he stepped into the conference room and saw the situation, a well-mannered guy in a plain jacket, a CEO with her arms crossed, an entire room that reeked of embarrassment, his instinct told him something was off. Ma'am, Marcus said. This gentleman was just leaving, Victoria said. He came onto a floor he wasn't authorized to be on. Please escort him out. Marcus looked at Nathan. Nathan looked back at Marcus, and gave him a small, almost kind nod, the nod of one working man to another, a nod that said, none of this is your fault, and I don't hold it against you. Sir, Marcus said a little uncertainly. If you'll come with me. Of course, Nathan said. And that was it. There was no scene. That's the thing Victoria expected, a scene. She expected him to protest, to shout, to threaten a lawsuit, to make himself look small and hysterical, so that everyone in the room would see how right she'd been to remove him. That's what men did when you took away their dignity. They grabbed for it, clumsily, and in grabbing for it, they lost even more. Nathan didn't grab for anything. He calmly gathered his leather folder. He slid his chair back in, actually pushed it back under the table. A small gesture of ingrained courtesy that Victoria noticed and immediately dismissed. He looked around the room once. At Rachel. At the two young executives. At the guard. And finally back at Victoria. Thank you for your time, he said. And he meant it. That was the maddening thing. There wasn't a drop of sarcasm in it. He turned and walked out with Marcus. And the door closed behind them with a soft, expensive click. And Victoria Hale leaned back in her chair with the satisfied, weary air of a woman who has just handled an unpleasant interruption to her important day. Unbelievable, she muttered. The nerve of some people. Nobody in the room said anything. She looked up. Rachel, where are we with the real investors? The Sterling Group, did they confirm for Thursday? Rachel didn't answer right away. She was staring at her tablet, and her face had gone from pale to something closer to gray. Victoria, Rachel said slowly. I need you to look at something. After the meeting. No now, Rachel's voice cracked on the word. You need to look at this now. Down in the lobby, Nathan Whitmore shook Marcus's hand. For what it's worth, Nathan said, you handled that better than most would have. You've got a good way about you. Marcus, who had spent the last 3 minutes wanting to be anywhere else on earth, blinked. I'm sorry about all that, sir. I don't know what that was up there. You seem like a decent guy. It's all right. Nathan pulled out his phone. Can I ask you something, Marcus? How long have you worked here? 6 years. You like it? Marcus hesitated. It was the hesitation of a man who needed his job and knew that honesty could cost him. It's a paycheck, he finally said. The people up on the top floors, they don't much notice guys like me. But it's steady. And I got 2 kids in school, so steady's what I need. Nathan nodded slowly. He filed that away the way he filed everything away. The name Marcus. 2 kids, 6 years of loyalty to a company whose leadership didn't know he existed. It was, in its own small way, another data point in the picture. Nathan had been assembling of Evercrest Technologies for 11 months. A picture that had, in the last 5 minutes, come into sudden and painful focus. You take care of yourself, Nathan said, and he walked out through the glass doors into the gray morning, pulling his collar up against a wind that was colder than the calendar had promised. He got in the back of a plain black sedan, not a limousine, not a chauffeured luxury car, just a clean, ordinary sedan driven by a man named Eddie who had worked for Nathan for 9 years, and as the car pulled away from the curb, Nathan took out his phone and called the one person he told everything to. Well, said the voice on the other end. It was Claire Morrison. She was 51, she'd been Nathan's business partner for a decade, and she had a way of asking a single word that carried the weight of an entire conversation. It's done, Nathan said. Or done as in minus. Done as in I never sat down. There was a silence on the line. Claire had been in the game a long time. She knew the difference between a deal that fell apart over terms and a deal that fell apart over something else entirely. Nathan, what happened? Nathan looked out the window at the Evercrest Tower shrinking behind them. The meeting lasted 3 minutes, he said. She had security walk me out. Security. Claire's voice went sharp. She threw you out. Does she even know who you? No, Nathan said. She doesn't. That's the whole point, Claire. She had no idea who I was. She took one look at what I was wearing and she decided I wasn't worth the 20 minutes. Another silence. So she rejected the deal, Claire said. No, Nathan said quietly. She rejected me. Before she knew a single thing about me. She never even got to the deal. The deal was the last thing on her mind. She looked at my shoes and she decided the whole conversation was over. Claire exhaled long and slow. Nathan, I have to ask you this, and I need you to actually think about it before you answer. Is this personal now? Because if you walk away from $400 million in a company you've spent a year telling me is one of the best positioned firms you've ever seen, over a woman being rude to you in a conference room. It's not about the rudeness, Nathan said. Then what is it about? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the city rolled by office towers. Coffee shops. A school crossing where a woman in a crossing guard's vest was holding up a stop sign for a line of small children. He watched the children cross, and something in his chest tightened, the way it always did, because it made him think of Lily. Ad Claire, he said. Ad, you remember why I do this the way I do it? The clothes, the car, all of it? Ad, I remember. Ad, you remember what I told you the first time you asked me why a man worth what I'm worth drives around in a 9-year-old sedan and buys his shirts on sale? Ad, you said, Claire recited. Ad, because she'd heard it enough times to have it memorized. Ad, that the fastest way to find out what a person is really made of is to walk in looking like you can't do anything for them. Ad, and then watch how they treat you. That's right. Nathan, I've been doing that test for 20 years, Nathan said. Ad, and I have never not once put $400 million into a company run by someone who failed it. Claire was quiet. She failed it, Nathan said. Ad, in 3 minutes. Ad, in front of her whole staff. Ad, she looked at a man she thought could do nothing for her, and she had him thrown into the street. People have bad days, Nathan. They do, and I'd have forgiven a bad day. I'd have forgiven her being tired or stressed or short with me. Ad, but this wasn't a bad day, Claire. This was who she is when she thinks nobody important is watching. That's the only version of a person that ever tells you the truth. He paused. Ad, and here's the part I can't get past. There were 4 other people in that room. Ad, a guard, an assistant. Ad, 2 junior executives. Ad, and every single one of them worked for her. Ad, every one of them saw her do it. Ad, and not one of them felt safe enough to stop her. Ad, Claire understood then. She'd worked alongside Nathan long enough to know that he didn't just invest in balance sheets. Ad, he invested in how a place ran when the doors were closed, and a company where the leader could throw a stranger out into the cold, and the entire staff was too frightened to say a word that wasn't a balance sheet problem. Ad, that was a rot at the center. Ad, so that's it, Claire said. Ad, you're walking. Ad, Nathan didn't answer right away. Ad, the truth was more complicated than that, and he knew it, and it was the reason he was staring so hard out the window instead of just saying yes. Ad, because Nathan Whitmore had not spent 11 months studying Evercrest Technologies for nothing. He knew things about that company that Victoria Hale, sitting in her corner office, didn't even know. Ad, he knew that its core technology was genuinely brilliant. Ad, he knew that its engineers, the people 2 and 3 levels down from the top, the ones who never got invited to the important meetings, were some of the most talented he'd ever come across. Ad, he knew that the reason the company was dying had almost nothing to do with its products and almost everything to do with the person at the top. Ad, and he knew that 4,000 people were going to lose their jobs in 90 days if somebody didn't step in. Ad, 4,000 people like Marcus. Ad, 2 kids in school. Ad, steady's what I need. And I don't know yet, Nathan finally said. Give me some time. Ad, time is the one thing that company doesn't have, Claire said. You told me yourself. Ad, 90 days of cash, maybe less. Ad, if you're going to do this, you can't sit on it for a month. I know. And if she finds out who you are, and she will, Nathan, she's going to find out the second one of those junior executives Googles your name, she is going to come after you. She's going to call and email and fly across the country, and she is going to apologize 100 different ways. Ad, and you're going to have to decide what all that's worth. Ad, I know that too. Ad, so what do I tell the team? Nathan looked at the crossing guard one last time, as the car turned a corner and she disappeared from view. Tell them nothing yet, he said. Ad, tell them I'm thinking. He hung up. Back on the top floor of the Evercrest Tower, Victoria Hale was staring at a tablet screen, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she could not make her mouth form words. The screen showed a face. A calm, unremarkable face, the face of the man she had just had removed from the building. Ad, and beneath it, in clean sans serif type, was a name and a set of facts that were rearranging the entire architecture of Victoria's morning. Ad, Nathan Whitmore, founder and managing partner, Whitmore Capital. Ad, below that the numbers. Ad, the fund size. The names of companies he'd rescued. Ad, companies whose logos Victoria recognized instantly. Ad, companies that were now household names. Ad, companies that had been 3 months from collapse before a quiet man in plain clothes had walked in and decided they were worth saving. Ad, and one line, ad, near the bottom, ad, that made the blood drain out of her face. Ad, Whitmore Capital reportedly evaluating a 9-figure position in a distressed technology firm. Ad, details undisclosed. Ad, distressed technology firm. 9-figure position. Ad, details undisclosed. Rachel, Victoria said. Ad, her voice didn't sound like her own. Tell me this is a different Nathan Whitmore. Rachel didn't say anything. Ad, tell me this is a coincidence. Ad, tell me the man I just tell me that man is not. Ad, Victoria. Rachel's voice was almost a whisper. Ad, that's him. Ad, that's the investor. Ad, the 400 million. Ad, the whole reason that's him. Ad, the room was very, very quiet. Ad, Victoria Hale had been in crisis before. She'd stared down hostile boards, weathered lawsuits, survived 2 rounds of layoffs, and a product recall that nearly ended her. She knew what it felt like when the ground gave way. And she'd always found a way to talk her way back onto solid footing. That was her gift. When the walls closed in, Victoria Hale got faster, sharper, more ruthless, and she found the exit. But sitting there, holding that tablet, she felt something she had not felt in 19 years. She felt the specific stomach-hollowing terror of a person who realizes she has done something she cannot take back. Get him on the phone, she said. Victoria, I don't think. Get him on the phone right now. Rachel's hands were shaking as she pulled up the contact. She dialed. She put it on speaker and set the tablet on the table, and the whole room listened to it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. 4. And then a smooth automated voice. You've reached the office of Nathan Whitmore. Please leave a message. Victoria stared at the phone. Hang up, she said. Try his direct line. Rachel dialed again. This time it went straight to voicemail. No ring at all. Which meant one of 2 things. Either his phone was off, and Victoria knew this one in her gut. Knew it, the way you know a truth you don't want. He had seen the name Evercrest on the screen and sent it to voicemail with the press of a thumb. She had been ignored. Victoria Hale, who had spent her entire adult life deciding whose calls were worth taking and whose weren't. Who had built an empire on the power to make people wait. To make them small. To make them earn her attention. Victoria Hale had just been sent to voicemail by a man in a 10-year-old jacket. And she deserved it. And somewhere underneath the panic, she knew she deserved it. And that was almost the worst part of all. Email him, she said. And say what? Say there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Say I'd like to apologize personally. Say we'd like to reschedule at his earliest convenience. Anywhere. Anytime. We'll come to him. Victoria. One of the junior executives, a young man named David, spoke up for the first time. His voice was careful. Can I say something? Victoria looked at him like she'd forgotten he was there. I don't think an email's going to do it, David said. I was in the room. I saw his face when he left. That wasn't a guy who got his feelings hurt and needs a nice message to smooth it over. That was a guy who saw exactly what he wanted to see and got the answer he came for. What is that supposed to mean? David swallowed. But he kept going. And it took more courage than anyone in that room understood. Because you did not contradict Victoria Hale and keep your standing. It means I don't think he came here just for the deal. I think he came here to figure out what kind of person you were. And I think he found out. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Victoria had ever heard. Because she knew he was right. Somewhere below the terror and the frantic calculation, in the part of her that still told the truth, Victoria Hale understood that David had just named the exact thing she couldn't bear to look at. Nathan Whitmore had come to test her. And she had failed. Completely. In 3 minutes. With witnesses. Everybody out, she said quietly. Nobody moved. Out, they filed out. Rachel lingered at the door. One hand on the frame. And turned back like she wanted to say something, some small comfort. Some plan. Some it's not over yet. But she saw Victoria's face. And she thought better of it. And she left. And the door clicked shut. And Victoria Hale sat alone in a glass conference room 40 floors above a city that had no idea her company was dying. And she pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. And for a long time she didn't move. Here is something you should understand about Victoria Hale, because the story doesn't make sense without it, and because the person she is at the start is not the person you'll meet at the end. She had not always been cruel. 22 years earlier, she'd been a girl from a mid-sized town in Ohio, the daughter of a man who fixed refrigerators and a woman who cleaned other people's houses. She'd worn hand-me-downs to school. She'd known exactly what it felt like to be the kid whose shoes gave her away, Ad. The kid the other kids looked at and sorted. Ad. In 2 seconds. And into the pile marked doesn't matter. Ad. She had spent her entire life running from that pile. And somewhere along the way she couldn't have told you when. Ad. There was no single moment. Ad. It happened the way rust happens. Ad. Slowly and then all at once Victoria Hale had crossed over. She'd stopped being the kid who got sorted, and she'd become the one doing the sorting. She'd built a wall around herself out of tailored suits and cold smiles and refused handshakes, and she'd told herself that the wall was strength. It wasn't strength. Ad. It never had been. It was the same fear she'd carried out of that schoolyard in Ohio, dressed up in expensive clothes. Ad. And this morning, that fear had walked her straight off a cliff. Ad. She picked up her phone. Ad. She didn't call Nathan again. Some instinct told her that more calls would only make it worse, would make her look exactly as desperate as she was. Ad. Instead, she pulled up the news. Ad. She typed his name into the search bar, and she began, for the first time, to actually learn about the man she'd thrown out. Ad. The first thing she found was a profile from 3 years back. A long piece the kind magazines wrote about people they found genuinely puzzling. And the puzzle, ad, according to the writer, ad, was this, ad. How does a man worth what Nathan Whitmore is worth live the way Nathan Whitmore lives? Ad. No mansion. Ad. A modest house in a normal neighborhood, on a street where the neighbors mowed their own lawns. Ad. No fleet of cars. Ad. No yacht, no private island, none of the trophies men in his position collected. Ad. He drove himself most places. Ad. He made his own coffee. And every single weekday morning, without fail, no matter what was happening in his business, he made breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter and drove her to school himself. His daughter. Ad. Lily. There was a photo in the article. Not a posed one, the writer had caught it. Ad. Nathan crouched down at the level of a small girl with pigtails. Ad. Tying her shoe. Ad. His briefcase set down on the sidewalk beside him. Ad. Completely unbothered by the fact that a photographer was watching. Ad. And the caption underneath it was a quote from Nathan. Ad. Victoria read it once. Ad. Then she read it again. Then she set the phone down on the table and stared at the wall, because the words had gone into her like a blade. The way a person treats someone who can do nothing for them, Nathan had said, is the truest thing you will ever learn about them. Ad. Money can be inherited. Titles can be bought. Ad. But how you treat the person carrying your bags, or cleaning your table, or standing at your door in cheap shoes, that's the one thing that's really yours. That's the only real resume there is. Victoria Hale sat in the silence of her glass office, and she thought about a security guard named Marcus whose name she didn't know. She thought about a man who pushed his chair back in before he was thrown out of a building. Ad. She thought about a girl from Ohio in hand-me-down shoes who had promised herself, a lifetime ago, that she would never make another human being feel the way those shoes had made her feel. Ad. And she thought about what she had done at 9 o'clock that morning. The article had one more line that stayed with her. The writer, ad, near the end, ad, had asked Nathan whether he ever worried that dressing plainly and driving an old car would cause people to underestimate him, to miss out on his business, and to fail to take him seriously. Ad. And Nathan had laughed, ad, apparently, ad, and said, ad, I'm counting on it. The people who underestimate me tell me everything I need to know. I've never lost $1 underestimating the wrong person. But I've saved a fortune, and I mean that literally, by finding out early who's going to look down on a man in cheap shoes. Ad. Because that person will look down on your customers and your employees and eventually on you. It always starts small. Ad. It always starts with somebody at the door. Ad. Somebody at the door. Victoria closed her eyes. Ad. She had 90 days of cash. She had a board that would gather like vultures the moment they smelled weakness. She had 4,000 people whose livelihoods hung on a deal she had personally, ad, single-handedly, ad, over the course of 180 seconds, ad, set on fire, ad. She had an assistant who was afraid of her, a staff that was afraid of her, and a young executive named David who'd been brave enough to tell her the truth, and whom she'd rewarded by ordering him out of the room. And somewhere across the country, ad, a quiet man was picking his daughter up from school, ad. A man who had all the money in the world and had chosen, ad, on purpose, ad, to walk into Victoria's life dressed like he had none of it so that he could find out exactly who she was. Ad. He'd found out. Ad. The question that would consume Victoria Hale for the next 100 days, the question she carried out of that conference room and into the sleepless nights, and the frantic flights and the phone calls that went unanswered. The question wasn't, how do I close this deal? The question was much smaller and much harder, and it was the first honest question she'd asked herself in 20 years. Who did I become? She stood up. She smoothed her jacket, the automatic gesture of a lifetime. She walked to the glass wall of her office and looked out over the city, at the millions of ordinary people down there living ordinary lives, people she had spent 2 decades climbing over, without ever once looking at their faces. And Victoria Hale, CEO of a dying company, 39 years old, alone in a room she'd emptied with her own voice, finally understood that the most dangerous person in that meeting hadn't been the man she thought was a con artist. It had been her. She picked up the phone one more time. Her thumb hovered over Nathan Whitmore's name. She knew he wouldn't answer. She knew a call wasn't enough. An email wasn't enough. 100 apologies wasn't enough, that whatever this was going to take, it was going to take more than she had ever given anyone in her life. She dialed anyway. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and went to voicemail. This time Victoria didn't hang up. She waited for the beep, and she opened her mouth to speak and found, to her own complete astonishment, that she had absolutely no idea to the one man in the world who had seen exactly who she was, and walked away. The beep came, and Victoria still didn't know what to say. So she said the only true thing she had. Mr. Whitmore, this is Victoria Hale. I don't have a speech. I don't have anything smart to say, and I think you'd see through it if I did. I made a terrible mistake this morning, and I know it. I'm not calling to save my company. I'm calling because you deserved better than what I gave you, and I'd like the chance to say that to your face. That's all. You don't owe me anything. She hung up before she could ruin it. Then she sat there, hands flat on the cold surface of the table, and waited for something to happen. Nothing did. The phone stayed dark. The city kept moving outside the glass like none of it mattered, because to the city it didn't. An hour passed. She didn't move. At 11:30, the door opened without a knock, and Victoria knew before she looked up who it was, because there was only one person in the building who walked into her office without knocking. Gerald Voss, the chairman of her board, a man of 71 with silver hair and a handshake he'd been using as a weapon since before Victoria was born. Victoria, he didn't sit. That was a bad sign. When Gerald sat, he wanted something. When he stood, he'd already decided something. Gerald, I just got off the phone with David Chen. Of course he had. David, the junior executive who'd been brave enough to tell her the truth. Victoria felt something cold move through her. Not anger, she was past anger, just a dull, resigned understanding of how these things worked. David called you. David did the right thing, Gerald said. David told me that at 9 o'clock this morning, my chief executive had Nathan Whitmore physically removed from the building by security. Is that true? Gerald, is it true, Victoria, yes or no? She looked at him. There was no room to move, and she knew it, and lying to Gerald Voss had never once worked in 11 years of trying. It's true, she said. Gerald let out a breath that seemed to take something out of him. He walked to the window and stood beside her, both of them looking out at the same gray sky, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Do you know, Gerald said finally, how long I've been trying to get that man into this building? Gerald, 14 months. 14 months of dinners, of phone calls, of flying to see him and being told he was busy. Nathan Whitmore does not chase companies, Victoria. Companies chase him. And for reasons I still do not fully understand, that man decided that our dying, over-leveraged, badly run little firm was worth his time. He was going to write us a check that would have saved 4,000 jobs. And you had him thrown out into the street because you didn't like his shoes. That's not it was. That was exactly what it was, and Victoria couldn't finish the sentence. I've spent my whole career watching people fail. Gerald went on, and his voice wasn't cruel, which was somehow worse. Most of the time it's slow. A bad quarter, then a bad year. A missed trend. Bad luck. But every once in a while I watch someone fail in a single afternoon. I watch them reach up and pull the whole thing down on their own head, and every time it's the same reason. Every time. It's not stupidity. Smart people do it too. It's contempt. They get to a place where they believe the rules of decency stopped applying to them somewhere around this next promotion. He turned and looked at her. I did not think you were one of those people, Victoria. I truly did not. I'm going to fix it, she said. I already left him a message. I'm going to mine it. You're going to fix it, Gerald almost laughed. You're going to fix Nathan Whitmore. Do you hear yourself? What do you want me to do, Gerald? Roll over and let this company die? I want you, Gerald said, to understand, for possibly the first time in your life, that some things cannot be fixed by being the smartest person in the room. Because that's the only tool you've ever had, and it is precisely the tool that got you here. He moved toward the door. The board meets in 9 days. If there is no path to capital by then, a real one, not a hope, not a message left on a voicemail, I will not be able to protect you. I'm not sure I should even try. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You're telling me I'm out. I'm telling you, Gerald said, that a man walked into your building this morning, holding the answer to every problem you have, and you called security. What happens next is not really up to me anymore. It's up to him. And I have no idea what kind of man he is. He left. Victoria sat alone again, but this time she didn't stare at the wall. This time she opened her laptop, and she started to read everything there was to read about Nathan Whitmore, because David had been right about one thing above all, this was not a man she could talk her way past. Words were the only weapon she'd ever trusted, and words were not going to work here. So she needed to understand him. Not to manipulate him. Some part of her had already given up on manipulation. She needed to understand him because, for the first time, she suspected that understanding him might be the same thing as understanding what had gone wrong with her. She read for 6 hours. She read the profile with the photograph of him tying his daughter's shoe. She read interviews going back 15 years. She read about the companies he'd saved. And this surprised her, the companies he'd refused to save. Companies with better numbers than hers. Companies he'd walked away from for reasons that had nothing to do with money. There was a pattern in his refusals, and it took her most of the afternoon to see it. And when she finally saw it, it made her feel physically ill. He didn't walk away from companies that were failing. He walked away from companies whose leaders treated the people below them badly. Every single time. There was a plant manager in Ohio he'd refused to fund because he'd watched the man scream at a line worker over a coffee spill. There was a tech founder he'd passed on after learning the man made his assistant work Christmas. Nathan Whitmore had, over 20 years, turned down more than $1 billion in returns for one consistent, unwavering reason. He would not put his money behind a person who was cruel to people who couldn't fight back. And Victoria Hale had had him thrown out of her building by a security guard. She closed the laptop. Then she did something she had not done in 19 years. She called her mother. The phone rang a long time. Her mother was 74 now, still in Ohio, still in the same small house, and Victoria called her 4 times a year: birthdays, holidays, obligations. She could not remember the last time she'd called just to talk. Vicky? Her mother's voice thin and surprised. Is everything all right? Hi, Mom. Victoria closed her eyes. Yeah, I wanted to hear your voice. Well, this is a nice surprise. Is it, though? You sound funny. You sound like you did when you were little, and you broke something, and you were working up to telling me. Victoria laughed, and it came out wet. I did something today, Mom. Something bad. To a person. What kind of bad? I was cruel to someone. Somebody who didn't deserve it. I looked at him and I decided he was nothing, and I treated him like he was nothing, and it turned out she stopped. It turned out he was somebody who could have helped me. But that's not even the part that's keeping me up. The part that's keeping me up is that it wouldn't have mattered if he was nobody. I still shouldn't have done it. And I would have. I'd have done it to anybody. There was a long silence on the line. You remember, her mother said slowly, the winter you were in 5th grade, the Kaminsky girl? Victoria's stomach dropped. She hadn't thought about the Kaminsky girl in 30 years. And the moment her mother said the name, she remembered everything. The whole scene. Complete and merciless. You came home from school, her mother said, and you were crying so hard I thought somebody had hit you. And it took me an hour to get it out of you. And you finally told me that the girls at school, the ones with the nice coats, they'd been making fun of that Kaminsky girl. Her family didn't have much. Her shoes had a hole. And the girls were laughing at her. And you cried, Vicky. Because you'd wanted so badly to be part of that group. Those girls with the nice coats. And to be part of it, you'd have had to laugh too. And you couldn't do it. You couldn't laugh at her. And it broke your heart. Because you understood that being one of them meant being cruel. And you didn't want to be cruel. But you wanted so badly to belong. Victoria was crying now, silently, the phone pressed to her ear. Whatever happened to that little girl? Her mother asked. The one who cried because she couldn't laugh at somebody's shoes? Victoria couldn't answer. I love you, Vicky, her mother said gently. But I've watched you for 20 years turn into one of the girls with the nice coats. And every time I try to say something, you tell me I don't understand your world. Maybe I don't. But I understood that little girl. And I miss her. They talked for a few more minutes, about small things, about nothing, and then Victoria said she had to go, and her mother told her to eat something and get some sleep, and they hung up. And Victoria Hale, 39 years old, CEO of a company with 90 days to live, sat at her desk and cried like the fifth-grade girl she'd spent 30 years trying to bury. The next morning there was still no word from Nathan. Victoria came in at 6. She'd barely slept. She'd made a decision at some point in the small hours. Lying awake. And the decision was simple and terrifying. She was going to go to him. Not call, not email. Go, get on a plane, fly across the country, and stand in front of the man and let him do whatever he was going to do. If he threw her out, fine. She'd earned it. But she was not going to sit in this glass tower and wait for her company to die while the one man who could save it decided whether she was worth a phone call. She had Rachel find out where Whitmore Capital's offices were. Then she booked a flight for that afternoon. At 9, David Chen knocked on her door. He looked like he'd slept about as well as she had. Come in, she said. He came in and stood there. And she could see he was braced for it. Braced for her to fire him. Because he'd gone over her head to Gerald and he knew she knew. Sit down, David. He sat. You told Gerald what I did yesterday, Victoria said. Yes, why? David swallowed. Because it was the right thing to do. Because 4,000 people's jobs were on the line and the board needed to know. And because he stopped. Finish it. Because I was hoping. David said quietly. That if it came out. It might, I don't know. Force a change. In how things work around here. I've watched people get treated like that for 3 years. Hale, not investors. Regular people. Assistants. The cleaning staff. Vendors. I've watched people get talked to like they were furniture, and everybody just accepts it. That's the culture. And yesterday I watched it cost us everything, and I thought maybe now. Maybe now it changes. Victoria absorbed that. It landed hard because it was true, and because she'd never once let herself see it before. You were right, she said. About all of it. About him. About the culture. About me. She stood up. I'm flying out this afternoon to see Nathan Whitmore in person. I want you to come with me. David blinked. Me? You saw his face when he left. I didn't, not really, I wasn't looking. You were. And you were the only person in that room with the guts to tell me the truth afterward. I'd rather have somebody with me who tells me the truth than somebody who tells me what I want to hear. I've had enough of the second kind. I think I hired most of them. She almost smiled. So, will you come? Yes, David said. Of course. They landed that evening. The flight had been 3 hours of Victoria staring out the window, rehearsing things to say and then discarding all of them, because everything she came up with sounded like a pitch, and she knew that a pitch was the last thing on earth that would work on Nathan Whitmore. By the time the plane touched down, she'd stopped rehearsing entirely. She'd decided she would just tell the truth, whatever it turned out to be when she opened her mouth, and let it be enough or not enough. The offices of Whitmore Capital were not what she expected. She'd expected marble and glass and intimidation, the architecture of money. Instead, it was a converted brick building in an unfashionable part of town, 4 stories, no signage except a small brass plate by the door. It looked like the office of an accountant or a modest law firm. It looked like the last place on earth you'd find a man who moved billions of dollars. Of course it did, Victoria thought. Of course it looked like this. She was beginning to understand him now, a day too late. She didn't have an appointment. She hadn't called ahead, because she was certain a call ahead would produce a polite refusal, and she couldn't refuse a woman who was standing in the lobby. So she and David walked in at 9 the next morning, and Victoria told the receptionist, a young man, kind-faced, that she was Victoria Hale, and that she was here to see Nathan Whitmore, and that she understood he wasn't expecting her. Is Mr. Whitmore expecting you? The receptionist asked. No, Victoria said. He's not. And I understand completely if he won't see me. But would you please tell him I'm here? Tell him I flew across the country to apologize, and that I'll wait as long as it takes, and that if he says no, I'll leave and I won't come back. The receptionist looked at her for a moment, something flickering behind his eyes, and Victoria realized that he knew. He knew who she was and what she'd done. Everyone in this building probably knew. The man in the cheap jacket who'd gotten thrown out of a CEO's meeting, that was the kind of story that traveled. She'd become a cautionary tale in the offices of the man she'd insulted. One moment the receptionist said and disappeared. Victoria and David waited. They waited 20 minutes, standing, because there was nowhere obvious to sit, and Victoria didn't feel she had the right to sit anyway. She waited the way a person waits for a verdict. Then a woman came down the stairs, 50-something, sharp-eyed, gray hair cut short. She looked Victoria up and down, and Victoria noted, with a fresh sting of shame, exactly how it felt to be looked up and down, and then she said, Hale, I'm Claire Morrison. I'm Nathan's partner. Victoria extended her hand. Claire looked at it for a beat that felt very deliberate, and then shook it, briefly. Nathan will see you, Claire said. I want you to know that I advised him not to. I want you to know that I think you're here because you need his money and for no other reason, and I've told him so. Her eyes were hard, but he decided to see you anyway. That's the kind of man he is. It's the kind of man that makes him easy to take advantage of, if you're that kind of person. So let me tell you something before you go up there. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. I have watched people apologize to Nathan Whitmore for 20 years. Smooth people. Practiced people. People who cried on cue. And Nathan sees through every single one of them, because it's the only thing he's really good at, seeing what a person actually is, underneath what they're pretending to be. So don't perform for him. It won't work, and it'll be worse than saying nothing. Do you understand me? I do, Victoria said. And Ms. Morrison, you're right. I do need his money. My company dies without it. 4,000 people lose their jobs. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that isn't part of why I came. She took a breath. But it isn't the only reason. And I don't expect you to believe that. I'm not sure I'd believe me either. All I can do is go up there and tell him the truth and let him decide. Claire studied her for a long moment. Something in her expression shifted. Very slightly, not warmth. Not forgiveness. Just the faintest recalibration. The look of a person who'd expected one thing and gotten something a little different. 4th floor, Claire said. Your associate waits down here. David nodded and sat. Victoria climbed the stairs alone. Nathan's office was on the top floor, at the end of a plain hallway with worn carpet. The door was open. And there he was. Sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been bought secondhand 30 years ago. In a gray sweater. Reading something on paper with a pen in his hand. On the wall behind him there were no diplomas, no awards, no framed magazine covers. There was one thing. A child's drawing. In crayon. Of a stick figure man holding hands with a stick figure girl. With a lopsided sun in the corner, and the words "I love you, Daddy" in wobbling letters. He looked up. Miss Hale, he said. He didn't stand. He didn't offer his hand. But his voice wasn't cold either. It was just even, the same even voice from the conference room. Come in, sit down. She came in. She sat. For a moment neither of them said anything. Nathan set down his pen. He folded his hands on the desk and looked at her, and Victoria had the disorienting experience of being seen, actually seen, all the way down by a person who was in no hurry and had nothing to prove. You left me a voicemail, Nathan said. Yes, it was a good one. It was the first thing I've heard from your company that didn't sound like it came out of a public relations department. He tilted his head slightly. So, you flew all the way out here. You could have kept calling. You could have sent your chairman, Gerald Voss, has been trying to get me on the phone for a day and a half. And I like Gerald, I always have. But you came yourself. Why? Victoria had rehearsed nothing because she'd thrown all the rehearsals out on the plane. So what came out of her mouth was just the truth in the order it arrived. Because a phone call is safe, she said. And an email is safer. And I've spent 20 years hiding behind safe things. Refused handshakes. Cold smiles. Making people come to me so I'd never have to go to anyone. And I realized on the plane that if I called you again, I'd just be doing the same thing I've always done, trying to control the situation from behind a wall. And I didn't want a wall between us for this. I wanted to sit in a chair across from you and let you look at me and decide what I am. Because you already saw the worst version of me. You saw it in the first 30 seconds. And I thought the least I could do was let you see the rest. Nathan didn't say anything. He was watching her very closely. I'm not going to tell you I'm a good person who had a bad day, Victoria went on. I read about you all night. I know that's what everyone tells you. And I know you can smell it. So I'll tell you the true thing instead, which is worse. It wasn't a bad day. What I did to you yesterday is who I've been for a long time. If you'd been anyone else, if you'd actually been the nobody I decided you were, I'd have done the exact same thing, and I'd have gone to lunch afterward, and never thought about you again. That's the part that's been keeping me up. Not that I insulted a billionaire. That I've been insulting people who couldn't fight back for years, and it took getting caught by someone who could to make me see it. Nathan leaned back in his chair. The old wood creaked. You know, he said, in 20 years, I don't think anyone's ever put it quite like that. Usually they tell me they didn't recognize me. As if that's the defense. His eyes were steady on her. As if the problem was a case of mistaken identity. As if, had I only been wearing the right suit, everything would have been fine. The problem wasn't that I didn't know you had money, Victoria said quietly. She'd read enough about him to know this was true even before he said it. The problem was that I thought a man without money was worth less. That's the whole thing, isn't it? That's what you came to find out. Something changed in Nathan's face. Just slightly. A kind of stillness that was different from before. Yes, he said. That's exactly what I came to find out. He stood up then, and walked to the window, and looked down at the plain street below, and for a moment he was quiet. Can I tell you something, Ms. Hale? Something I don't usually tell people I'm about to do business with or not do business with. Please. When I was 26 years old, Nathan said, still looking out the window, I had nothing. Less than nothing. I had a failed company and $40,000 in debt, and a wife who was starting to look at me the way you look at someone who's disappointed you one time too many. And I went to see a man about a job. A big man. Important. The kind of man I thought I wanted to become. And I wore the only suit I owned. Which was cheap and a little too big because I'd lost weight from stress. And I sat in his lobby for 2 hours. And when he finally came out, he looked at me. He looked at me the exact way you looked at me yesterday, Ms. Hale. I want you to understand that the exact same way. And he said to his assistant, loud enough for me to hear, tell this kid the position's been filled. And he walked back into his office. And the position had not been filled. I found out later they hired someone the following week. Nathan turned around. And I have never forgotten how that felt. Standing in that lobby. Being looked at like that. Being decided about in 2 seconds by a man who never asked me a single question. And I promised myself 2 things that day. The first was that I would never let anyone make me feel that small again. And I kept that promise. I worked. And I clawed. And I built what I built. And no one has made me feel that small since. And the second promise, Victoria asked. The second promise, Nathan said, was that I would never make anyone else feel that way. Not ever. Not once. And that one's been harder to keep. Because it turns out that when you have money and power, the whole world conspires to let you off the hook for how you treat people. Everyone bows. Everyone laughs at your jokes. Everyone tells you you're wonderful. And it would be the easiest thing in the world to believe them and to slowly become the man in that lobby. He looked at her. That's why I dress the way I dress. That's why I drive an old car and make my own coffee and walk into meetings looking like I can't do a thing for anyone. It's not humility, Ms. Hale, whatever the magazines say. It's a test. Ad. But it's not only a test for the people I'm meeting. Ad. It's a test for me. Ad. Because every time I walk into a room looking like a nobody, I remember exactly what it feels like to be one. Ad. And that memory has made me a better man than I would otherwise be. I'm certain of it. Ad. The office was very quiet. Somewhere below them, faintly, a phone was ringing. Ad. So here is where we are, Nathan said, sitting back down. You want my money. Ad. Your company needs it. Ad. And it's a good company underneath all its probs, I want you to know. I mean that. Ad. The technology is real. Ad. The people 2 and 3 levels down from you are exceptional. Ad. And it would be a genuine tragedy to let it die. Ad. 4,000 people. I've been carrying that number around for a day and a half, same as you have. Maybe longer. But, Ad. Nathan said, Ad. And held up one hand. Ad. And Victoria went silent. But I have spent 20 years refusing to put a single dollar behind a person who treats the powerless with contempt. Not once have I broken that rule. Ad. Not for a better deal, not for a bigger return, not for any reason at all. Because I have watched, over and over, what happens to a company run by that kind of person. Ad. It rots from the inside. The good people leave. The scared people stay. Ad. And eventually the contempt the leader shows to the world comes home. And it lands on the very people who were loyal enough to stick around. It always does. Ad. It's as reliable as gravity. He looked at her steadily. Ad. You showed me exactly who you are yesterday, miss. Ad. Hail. In 3 minutes. Ad. In front of your staff. Ad. And what you showed me was precisely the thing I've spent 2 decades refusing to fund. Ad. Victoria felt the floor drop out from under her. This was it. Ad. This was the no. Ad. She'd flown across the country to hear it in person. Ad. And now she was going to hear it. Ad. And her company was going to die. Ad. And 4,000 people were going to lose everything because of what she was. And I understand, she said. Ad. Her voice was steadier than she expected. Ad. Thank you for telling me to my face. Ad. That's more than I gave you. And I'll go. She started to stand. Ad. Sit down, Nathan said. Ad. I'm not finished. Ad. She sat. Here is the thing that's kept me up on my end, Nathan said slowly. Ad. For 20 years my rule has been simple. Ad. When I see contempt, I walk. Ad. And walking has always been easy. Ad. Because the people I've walked away from never once, Ad. In all that time, Ad. Understood what they'd done. Ad. They thought I passed because of the numbers. They thought I passed because of the market. Ad. Not one of them ever chased me across the country to sit in this chair and tell me that the problem wasn't my clothes, that the problem was what they believed about a man without them. He leaned forward. You're the first, Ms. Ad. Hale. Ad. In 20 years. Ad. You're the first person who failed my test and then understood. Ad. All the way down. Ad. Exactly what they failed. Ad. And that puts me in a position I've never been in before. Because my rule was never really punish cruel people. My rule was don't put good money behind people who won't change. Ad. And I have to sit here and ask myself an honest question, which is the person in front of me right now the same person who threw me out of that room yesterday? Ad. Or is she someone who got her heart broken open in the last 36 hours and is sitting here trying, clumsily, to become somebody better? Ad. Victoria didn't dare speak. Ad. I don't know the answer yet, Nathan said. I want you to understand that clearly, because I don't want you leaving this room thinking you've won something. You haven't. Ad. The odds are still very much against you. Ad. A day and a half of feeling terrible does not undo 20 years of who you've been, and I've watched too many people mistake the pain of getting caught for the work of actually changing. Those are not the same thing. One is easy, and one is the hardest thing a person ever does. He picked his pen back up and turned it over in his fingers and looked at her. Ad. But I'll tell you what I'm willing to do. Ad. I'm willing to find out. Ad. I'm willing to give you a chance to show me which one you are, the woman from the conference room, or the one in this chair. Ad. It won't be an easy chance. In fact, I'm going to make it harder than anything you've ever done. Ad. Harder than building your whole company. Ad. Because building a company only takes brains and will. Ad. And you have plenty of both. Ad. What I'm going to ask you to do takes something you've spent 20 years teaching yourself not to have. And most people can't get it back. Ad. Most people are too far gone. Ad. He set the pen down. So before I tell you what the chance is, Nathan said, I need to ask you one question. And I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Ad. Because I'll know if you're lying. Ad. And if you lie to me now. Ad. I promise you this conversation is over, and you'll never hear from me again. Ad. He looked at her, and his eyes were kind and merciless at the same time. Miss Hale, if I hand you the $400 million right now, today, no conditions, do you go back to your company and change how you treat the people in it? Or do you go back, save the company, feel relieved, and slowly, over about 6 months, become exactly the woman you were the morning you had me thrown out the door? Victoria opened her mouth to say the obvious thing, the thing that would get her the money, the thing that any smart person would say. And then she stopped. Because Claire Morrison's warning came back to her, don't perform for him. It won't work. And because her mother's voice came back to her. The little girl who cried because she couldn't laugh at somebody's shoes. And because she understood. Sitting in that second-hand chair under a child's crayon drawing. That this was the single most important question anyone had ever asked her. And that the true answer was not the one that got her the money. The true answer was worse. And she gave it anyway. I don't know, Victoria said. Nathan went very still. I want to tell you I'd change. She said. And her voice was shaking now. And she let it shake. I want to tell you that so badly. Because I know it's what gets me the money. And I know my company dies without it. And I can feel 4,000 people on my shoulders while I'm sitting here. But you ask me not to lie to you. And the honest answer is that I've been this person for 20 years. And I've never once managed to stop. And I'm terrified that if you handed me that check today, you'd be exactly right, I'd feel relieved. And the fear would fade. And in 6 months I'd be screaming at some assistant over a spreadsheet, and I wouldn't even remember your name. I don't trust myself. That's the truth. I don't know if I can change. Because I've never done it. And the only thing I know for sure is that I want to, and I'm not sure wanting to is enough. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand furiously, like she was angry at the tears. So there's your answer. I don't know. And I'm sorry it's not a better one. But you told me not to lie, and I'm done lying. To you and to myself. I think I've been lying to myself longest of all. The silence in the office stretched out. Nathan Whitmore looked at the woman across his desk for a long, long time. And then, very slowly, something happened to his face that had not happened once in the entire conversation. He smiled. Not a big smile. A small one, at the corner of his mouth. But it reached his eyes. And it changed everything. And Victoria didn't understand it. Didn't understand it at all. Until he spoke. You know, Nathan said quietly. If you'd told me yes, if you'd sat there and promised me you'd change. Looked me in the eye and swore it, I'd have known you were lying. And this would be over. He stood up. And this time, for the first time, he came around the desk toward her. But you didn't. You told me you don't know. You told me the one thing that couldn't possibly help you, because it happened to be true. He stopped in front of her. Miss Hale, do you have any idea how rare that is? In 20 years of this, do you have any idea how few people, sitting in that chair with everything on the line, will choose the true answer over the useful one? Victoria stared up at him. That, Nathan said, is the first thing you've done since I met you that makes me think you might actually be able to change. Because change doesn't start with certainty. It doesn't start with a promise. It starts with a person finally being willing to tell themselves the truth about who they are. He extended his hand down toward her, the same hand she'd refused to shake in the conference room. Offered again now, an offer and a test and a mercy all at once. So let's find out. Let's find out together whether you're too far gone, or whether the little girl your mother remembers is still in there somewhere. Victoria looked at his hand, and then she understood that he'd known about her mother, or guessed it, or seen straight through to the shape of it that this quiet man had spent 36 hours learning her, the way she'd spent one night learning him, and had come to some conclusion she couldn't yet see. She reached up and took his hand. There are going to be conditions, Nathan said as she shook it. Hard ones. Harder than you're imagining right now. And the first one is going to hurt more than all the rest put together, and I'm going to tell you what it is right now, so you have time on the flight home to decide whether you can actually do it. Because if you can't do the first one, none of the others matter, and we're both wasting our time. Victoria didn't let go of his hand. Tell me, she said. Nathan didn't sit back down. He stayed standing, still holding her hand a moment longer than a handshake required, and when he finally let go, He walked back around the desk slowly, like a man choosing his words with the same care he'd choose a number in a term sheet. Tomorrow morning, he said, you're going to walk into your office. And before you look at a single spreadsheet, before you talk to your lawyers, before you call Gerald Vaas and tell him the deal is back on, you're going to find the security guard who walked me out. Marcus, and you're going to apologize to him. Not to me. To him. Victoria blinked. Marcus, you don't even know his last name, do you? She didn't. The realization landed like a slap. That's exactly my point, Nathan said. You've walked past that man for 6 years. He's opened doors for you. Checked badges for you. Probably wished you a good morning 1,000 times. And you have never once learned his name. I learned it in the 90 seconds it took him to walk me to the elevator. He's got 2 kids in school. He told me the people on the top floors don't much notice guys like him, and he said it like it was just weather, like it was a fact of nature he'd made peace with a long time ago. Nathan's jaw tightened, just slightly. That's the real scorecard, Miss Hale, not the 400 million, not the board. The real scorecard is whether a man who checks badges for a living feels seen by the people he works for. And right now the answer is no, and it's been no for 6 years, and it was no for years before I ever walked through that door. I'll do it, Victoria said immediately. I'll apologize to Marcus first thing tomorrow. I know you will. That part's easy. Nathan's eyes stayed steady on her. The hard part is what comes after. Because an apology to one man on one morning is a nice gesture, and gestures are cheap, and I've watched 100 executives make a show of humility for a week, and then slide right back into who they were. So here's the actual condition, and I want you to hear all of it before you agree to anything. He held up one finger. First, you do not become CEO again the moment this deal closes. For the next 6 months, you share real decision-making authority with an operating committee people from inside your own company. And I mean people from every level, not just your executive floor. Engineers. Support staff. Line managers. People whose names you're going to have to learn, because they'll be in the room. Victoria felt something tighten in her chest, not resistance exactly. Fear. The fear of losing the one thing she'd spent 19 years building. Total control. Second. Nathan raised a second finger. You conduct what I call a listening audit. You personally, not HR. Not a consultant. You sit down with 50 employees. One at a time. Chosen at random from every department. And you ask them one question. What has it been like to work here? And you don't defend yourself. You don't explain. You listen, and you write down what they say, and at the end of it you read every single page out loud to your board. 50 people, Victoria said quietly. 50 people. It'll take you weeks. It's supposed to. Third, a third finger. Public accountability. Not a press release written by your communications team, scrubbed of anything that costs you something. An actual public statement. In your own words. Admitting exactly what happened in that conference room, and what it revealed about how you've run this company. No spin, no in hindsight I could have handled the situation differently. The truth, plainly told, the same way you told it to me an hour ago. Victoria's stomach turned over. She thought of every headline that would follow, every competitor who'd use it against her, every investor who'd quietly wonder if she was damaged goods. That's going to cost me. Reputationally. It could follow me for years. It should, Nathan said, without apology. That's not cruelty, Hale, that's arithmetic. You spent 19 years building a reputation on being untouchable, and untouchable is exactly the thing that let you have a man thrown into the street without a second thought. If the reputation doesn't cost you something now, it never gets rebuilt into something worth having. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question she was almost afraid to ask. And the fourth? Nathan's expression changed, then softened, in a way that surprised her, the hard edges of the negotiation falling away into something that looked almost like grief. The fourth one isn't a condition, he said. It's a story. And I want you to hear it before you decide anything, because I think it'll tell you more about why I'm asking for the first 3 than anything else I could say. He walked to the window again. Outside, the ordinary street kept being ordinary, a delivery truck. A woman walking a dog. None of them aware that a company's fate was being decided 4 floors above them. You asked me yesterday, in the conference room, without meaning to, you asked me with your whole face, Why a man with what I have chooses to live like I have nothing. Ad. Nathan said. Ad. I told you part of it. The lobby, the man who told his assistant the job was filled. Ad. That's true. But it's not the whole truth, and the whole truth is harder. Ad. He turned back to her. Ad. My wife left me 4 years ago, he said. Ad. Lily's mother. And I want to be careful here. Ad. Because I'm not going to sit in judgment of her divorce is complicated. Ad. And there were things wrong on both sides. Ad. And I've made my peace with most of it. Ad. But I'll tell you the thing she said to me on her way out the door, because it's the thing that changed how I live. He paused. Ad. She said, Nathan, you've become a person who is only kind when someone's watching who matters. You're wonderful to investors. You're wonderful to reporters. Ad. And you come home and you're short with me. Ad. Short with Lily. Ad. Distracted. Ad. Like the two of us are the least important meeting on your calendar. Ad. And I wanted to argue with her. Ad. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. But I sat with it for about a week and I realized she wasn't wrong at all. I had built an entire public identity around treating powerless people with dignity. The janitor. Ad. The intern. Ad. The stranger in the elevator, and I had gotten so busy performing that dignity for an audience that I'd forgotten to actually practice it at home. Ad. With the two people who had no audience at all. Ad. Who were never going to write an article about how I treated them. Ad. Victoria sat perfectly still. Ad. So I made changes, Nathan said. Ad. Real ones. Ad. I restructured my whole life around Lily. Ad. I stepped back from half my board seats. Ad. I started making breakfast every morning myself. Ad. Not because I need the world to see a billionaire flip pancakes. Ad. But because it's the only hour of the day that's completely hers. Ad. Completely mine. Ad. With nobody performing for anybody. Ad. And here's the thing I learned, Miss. Ad. Hale, the thing I want you to actually hear. He looked at her directly. Ad. It didn't work because I decided to be a better man. It worked because I built a structure around myself that made it very hard to go back to being the old one. Ad. I didn't trust my own intentions to hold. Intentions are cheap. I'd had good intentions for years, and they hadn't stopped me from failing my daughter. Ad. What worked was routine. Ad. Accountability. Small, unglamorous habits repeated on days nobody was watching. Ad. Until they weren't habits anymore. Ad. They were just who I'd become. Ad. He came and sat on the edge of the desk, closer to her now. Ad. That's what these conditions are, he said. Ad. They're not punishment, whatever it might feel like at 3 a.m, when you're drafting that public statement. Ad. They're structure. Because I don't believe you can decide your way out of 19 years of contempt. I believe you have to build a cage around the old version of yourself and live inside it long enough that a new version grows up in its place. Ad. The operating committee isn't there to embarrass you. It's there because you cannot be trusted yet. Ad. To catch yourself. Ad. And neither could I once. Ad. And I needed my own version of that cage before I trusted myself either. Ad. Victoria found that her hands were shaking in her lap. Ad. She pressed them flat against her knees to stop it. Ad. And if I do all of it, she said. Ad. The committee. The 50 conversations. Ad. The public statement. Ad. Marcus. If I do every single thing you're asking, does the money come? Does Evercrest survive? Ad. Nathan said simply. Ad. I'm not holding 4,000 jobs hostage to test your soul, Miss. Ad. Hale, whatever it might look like from where you're sitting. Ad. The moment you commit to this, really commit. Not perform commitment, my lawyers start drafting the term sheet. And we move as fast as any deal I've ever done. Because your company doesn't have time for me to be precious about it. The conditions aren't a maze I'm making you wander through to enjoy watching you suffer. Ad. They're the only version of this deal I know how to do in good conscience. Ad. I'm not interested in rescuing a company and leaving its culture exactly as rotten as I found it. Ad. That's not saving anything. That's just delaying a worse collapse 5 years down the road, with better financials and the same sickness underneath. Victoria let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since she walked through his door. Okay, she said. Ad. Nathan's voice sharpened slightly, not unkindly but firmly. Ad. I need you to actually think about the hardest one. Not Marcus. Marcus will be uncomfortable for an hour and then it'll feel like relief. Most apologies do. I mean the public statement. Ad. I need you to picture your name in every trade publication, every business channel, for a solid week, attached to the story of a CEO who had a stranger thrown out of a meeting because of his shoes. I need you to picture your competitors using it in pitch decks against you for years. Ad. I need you to picture your own mother reading it in whatever paper reaches Ohio. Victoria flinched. She hadn't told him about Ohio. Claire did some digging, Nathan admitted without embarrassment. I wanted to know who I was dealing with before I decided anything. I know about the town. I don't know the whole story, but I know enough to guess it matters to you. His voice gentled again. So, can you actually survive that? Not survive it financially. I know you can survive it financially. That's what my money is for. Can you survive it as a person? Because I've watched leaders promise me anything in a room like this one. And then, 3 weeks later, quietly ask their lawyers to soften the language of the statement until it says almost nothing at all. If that happens, Miss Hale, if I read a mealy-mouthed non-apology with your name at the bottom of it, the deal is off. Permanently. And I will tell every investor who asks me exactly why. Victoria looked down at her hands, and then back up at him, and something in her had gone very still and very clear, the way the ocean goes still right before a big set of waves. When I was in 5th grade, she said, there was a girl in my class named Katie Kaminsky. Her family didn't have money. Her shoes had a hole in them. And the popular girls used to laugh at her for it. And I wanted so badly to belong to that group that I stood there and watched them do it. More than once. And said nothing. I never joined in. But I never stopped it either. And 30 years later, I still remember exactly what her face looked like the day they did it in the cafeteria. In front of everybody. Her voice had gone very quiet. I spent 30 years running from being the kid who couldn't afford new shoes. And apparently I ran so hard and so far that I turned into the girls who laughed at her. That's not a metaphor, Miss Whitmore. That's a fact I only understood about myself in the last 24 hours. And it's the ugliest thing I've ever learned about who I am. Nathan didn't say anything. He let her keep going. So yes, Victoria said. I can survive the article. I can survive my mother reading it honestly. I think it might be the thing that finally lets her recognize me again. What I don't know if I can survive is going back to being the person who wrote it. That's the part that actually terrifies me. Not the headline. The relapse. Good, Nathan said. That's the correct thing to be afraid of. He stood up off the desk edge and extended his hand a second time, the third time. If she was counting, since she'd walked through his door, and each time it had meant something different. Then we have a deal in principle, he said. My team will have paper for your team within 72 hours. And Miss Hale, one more thing. And this one isn't a condition. It's a request. And you can say no. After everything else, you're asking permission for something? A small real smile crossed his face. I'd like you to meet my daughter. Not as part of the deal. I'd never put a child in the middle of a business transaction. I mean it as something else. Lily is 8. She is, without question, the most honest person I know. Because 8-year-olds haven't yet learned to perform kindness for people who might be useful to them. She either likes you or she doesn't, and she'll tell you which within about 30 seconds. And I have learned over the years to trust her judgment of people almost more than my own. He looked at Victoria steadily. If you're serious about becoming someone different, I think it would do you good to spend an afternoon around someone who has no idea what $1 billion is, and doesn't yet know how to look at a person's shoes and decide what they're worth. Victoria felt tears come to her eyes again, unexpectedly, and this time she didn't wipe them away. I would like that very much, she said. They shook hands one final time, and this time neither of them let go too quickly, and something had shifted in the room that had nothing to do with the deal at all. Victoria flew home that night with David beside her, and for most of the flight neither of them spoke. Somewhere over the middle of the country, David finally broke the silence. Can I ask what happened up there, he said. You look different. I don't mean that as an insult. You look like you left something behind. Victoria looked out the window at the dark shapes of clouds below, lit faintly by a moon she couldn't see. I think I did, she said. I think I left a version of myself in that office, and I'm not entirely sure who's going to get off this plane instead. I hope it's someone better. I don't actually know yet. I guess that's the whole point. She thought about Marcus, and what she was going to say to him in the morning, and found, to her own surprise, that she was more nervous about that 5-minute conversation than she had been about anything in the boardroom of Nathan Whitmore. Because Nathan could forgive her or not forgive her, and either way her company might survive. But Marcus owed her nothing, had no reason to accept anything from her, and there was no $400 million deal riding on whether he chose to believe she meant it. And that, she understood now, was exactly the test. Not the one Nathan had designed. The one underneath it. The plane began its descent as the city lights came into view below. Spread out like something spilled and glittering. And Victoria Hale pressed her forehead lightly against the cold window and thought. For the first time in longer than she could remember. Not about the company. Not about the board. Not about the deal. She thought about a girl with a hole in her shoe, and a cafeteria 30 years gone, and a debt she had never once tried to pay. Victoria was at the office by 6:15 the next morning. Before the sun had fully cleared the buildings. And she'd changed her clothes twice before leaving her apartment. Which was its own small absurdity. She'd almost reached for a blazer sharp enough to armor a boardroom. And then caught herself. And put on something plainer instead. And stood in front of the mirror feeling foolish for how much thought she'd put into what to wear to apologize to a man she'd never bothered to look at. She found Marcus at the front desk, exactly where he always was, exactly where he'd been for 6 years while she passed him without a second glance. He looked up when she came through the revolving doors, and something careful crossed his face, the look of a man bracing for whatever version of Victoria Hale was about to arrive. Because after yesterday, he had no way of knowing which one it would be. Miss Hale, he said. Morning. Marcus. She stopped in front of his desk instead of walking past it, which she realized, with a small jolt, she had never once done in 6 years. Do you have a minute? He glanced at the empty lobby. I've got about 1,000 of them right now, if we're being honest. Victoria almost smiled, but she didn't let herself, because this wasn't the moment for charm, and charm was exactly the tool she'd used her whole career to smooth over things she should have actually faced. She made herself stand there, a little awkward, a little exposed. I want to apologize to you, she said, for yesterday, and for longer than yesterday. Marcus's eyebrows went up slightly. I had you throw a man out of my meeting because I decided, in about 2 seconds, that he didn't matter, Victoria said. And you did what I told you to do, because that's your job, and I never once thought about what it might feel like, to be put in that position, to be told to remove someone who hadn't done anything wrong, by a boss who wouldn't even look you in the eye while she gave the order. I'm sorry for that. I put you in a bad spot and I didn't care that I was doing it. Miss Hale, I was just doing what— I know, Victoria said. That's not the part I'm apologizing for. You didn't do anything wrong. And I did, and there's more. She took a breath. I've walked past your desk almost every day for 6 years, and until yesterday I didn't know your name was Marcus. I found that out from a man I'd just had you throw into the street, which should tell you something about the kind of employer I've been. So I'm sorry for that too. For 6 years of not seeing you. Not just yesterday. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was trying to determine whether this was a performance or the real thing. And Victoria understood, with a fresh wave of shame, that he had every right to make her wait for his verdict. Can I ask you something, he finally said. Anything. Did that guy, the one from yesterday, did he say something to you? Is that what this is? It was a fair question and it deserved a fair answer. Yes, Victoria said. He told me, essentially, that I'd have to earn back a chance to work with him. And part of what he asked me to do is come find you first, before anything else, because he said the real measure of who I am isn't how I treat him. It's how I treat you. She held his gaze. But I want to be honest, Marcus, because you deserve honesty more than you deserve a nice story. If he hadn't said that, I don't know if I'd be standing here right now. I'd like to tell you I'd have figured this out on my own eventually. I don't actually know if that's true. So I'm not going to pretend the money had nothing to do with why I woke up early this morning. But I will tell you that the apology itself, the part where I actually see what I did to you, and I'm sorry for it, that part's real, whatever got me here. Marcus considered that for a long moment. Then slowly something in his posture loosened. That's about the most honest thing a boss has ever said to me, he said. Most people, when they apologize, they want you to tell them it's okay right away so they can stop feeling bad. You didn't do that. You just told me the truth and let me sit with it. I'm trying to stop doing the other thing, Victoria said. The making people comfortable so I can move on thing. Marcus almost laughed. Well, for what it's worth, I appreciate it. And for what it's worth, that guy yesterday. He talked to me for maybe 90 seconds on the way to the elevator, and he made me feel more like a person than most executives manage in 6 years of walking past me. So I don't think you're wrong about him being worth listening to. He asked about your kids, Victoria said. 2 of them, right? In school? Marcus blinked, surprised she remembered. Yeah, Jaden and Maya. I'd like to actually know that going forward, Victoria said. Not because someone's testing me. Because I think I've forgotten, somewhere along the way, that this building is full of people who have whole lives outside of what they do for me between 9 and 5. She thanked him, and turned to head for the elevator, and Marcus called after her not urgently, just a small, human afterthought. Miss Hale. She turned back. Jaden's in 3rd grade. Maya just started kindergarten. In case you were serious about wanting to know. I was, Victoria said. And found, to her own surprise, that she meant it completely. The next several days moved faster than Victoria had believed possible. Because Nathan Whitmore, once he committed to something, moved with the same quiet, unhurried efficiency he brought to everything else. Term sheets arrived. Lawyers on both sides worked long nights. Gerald Voss, when Victoria called to tell him the deal was back on and explained fully, honestly, leaving nothing out the conditions attached to it, went silent on the phone for so long she thought the call had dropped. Gerald, are you there? I'm here, Gerald said finally. I'm just trying to remember the last time I heard you admit to being wrong about anything, and I'm coming up empty. Victoria, do you understand what you're agreeing to? An operating committee. 50 employee interviews. A public statement that's going to follow you for the rest of your career. This isn't a slap on the wrist. This is you signing up to be humbled in front of the entire industry. I know exactly what I'm agreeing to, Victoria said. I negotiated every word of it sitting across from the man himself. And Gerald, I think I need it. Not the company. Me. There was another silence, shorter this time. All right, Gerald said, and something in his voice had changed, had softened in a way Victoria hadn't heard from him in years. All right, I'll bring it to the board. For what it's worth, Victoria and I don't say this lightly. This is the first time in a decade you've sounded like someone I'd actually want running my company. The operating committee took shape within a week. By design, nothing like the executive team Victoria was used to. There was an engineer named Priya who'd been with Evercrest for 4 years and had never once been invited past the 2nd floor. There was a woman from customer support named Denise who'd filed 11 complaints about workplace culture over 3 years, every single one of which had disappeared into a drawer somewhere without response. There was a facility supervisor named Hector who managed the cleaning staff and who, when Victoria first sat across from him in a meeting, visibly braced himself for the conversation to be a formality, a box to check, before the real decisions got made somewhere else without him. It took him 3 meetings to stop bracing. You're actually writing down what I say, he told her, somewhere in the 3rd week, sounding almost bewildered by it. I keep waiting for someone to tell me my part of this is done, and we can move on to what actually matters. This is what actually matters, Victoria said. I'm sorry it's taken this long for someone to tell you that, and mean it. The 50 interviews were the hardest thing Victoria had ever done in her professional life, harder than any negotiation, harder than any hostile board meeting, and she understood, about interview number 6, exactly why Nathan had built it into the deal the way he had. It was one thing to apologize to a man she'd wronged in front of witnesses. It was another thing entirely to sit across from 50 ordinary employees, one at a time, day after day, and ask them a single open question. What has it been like to work here? And then say nothing while they told her. Some of them were careful at first, guarded, clearly worried this was a trap, that whatever they said would come back on them later. She understood that fear, she had built it, brick by brick, over 19 years, and she couldn't undo it with a single conversation. But some of them, once they understood she meant it, once they saw her sitting there with a legal pad and no defense prepared, told her things that landed like small, precise wounds. A young data analyst named Tobias told her he'd once submitted a proposal that had been quietly implemented 6 months later under someone else's name, and when he'd raised it quietly, to his manager, he'd been told to let it go if he wanted to keep advancing. A woman in accounting named Sarah told her she'd taken a leave for her mother's illness 2 years ago and come back to find she'd been passed over for a promotion she'd been the obvious choice for, with no explanation offered. An older employee named Walter, who'd been with the company almost since its founding, told her quietly, without bitterness, that he'd stopped bringing new ideas to meetings around year 11, because year after year of watching them dismissed without real consideration had taught him it wasn't worth the emotional cost of trying. She wrote every word down. She didn't defend the company. She didn't explain. Some nights she went home and sat on her kitchen floor and cried, not out of self-pity, but out of the accumulating weight of finally seeing, in specific human detail, what her leadership, her absence of leadership, her distance, her coldness had actually cost the people who worked for her. David Chen sat in on several of the interviews, at Victoria's request, and one evening, after the 40th or so conversation, he found her still sitting in the small meeting room they'd been using, staring at pages and pages of notes. "You okay?" he asked. "No," Victoria said honestly. "I built a company where a man stopped sharing his ideas 11 years ago because nobody was listening, and I never knew, and I never asked, and I called myself a good leader the entire time because the stock price was up." She looked at David. "How do you even begin to fix something like that?" "I think," David said carefully, "you just did the first part. You asked." Nobody's asked Walter that question in 11 years, and today somebody finally did, and he got to say it out loud to the person who actually has the power to change it. That's not nothing, Victoria. That's the whole beginning. She read all 50 pages aloud to the board 9 days later, exactly as Nathan had required. It took nearly 3 hours. Gerald Voss sat through the entire thing without interrupting once, and by the end, when Victoria finally set down the last page, Marcus's own words, near the very end, about 6 years of feeling invisible, several members of the board would not meet her eyes, because it was one thing to hear about a culture problem in the abstract language of an HR report, and quite another to hear it in 50 distinct human voices, read aloud by the woman responsible. "I want it noted in the minutes," Victoria said, when she finished, that every word you just heard happened on my watch. Not despite my leadership. Because of it. I built a company where people were afraid to tell the truth, and then I was surprised when nobody told me the truth, and that surprise was its own kind of lie I was telling myself. I'm not asking anyone in this room to forgive that today. I'm asking you to hold me to actually fixing it. The public statement was the part Victoria dreaded most, exactly as she'd told Nathan she would, and she wrote 7 drafts before she managed one that didn't, somewhere in its careful sentences, quietly protect her. Her communications director, a sharp, well-meaning woman named Priscilla, kept trying to soften the language rather than contempt, perhaps an error in judgment, rather than naming the specific incident, perhaps a broader statement about company culture initiatives, and each time, Victoria made herself stop, and remember Nathan's face across that desk, telling her he'd know a mealy-mouthed apology when he read one, and she rewrote it again, harder, plainer, less comfortable. The final version ran just under 400 words. It named exactly what had happened. It named Nathan by title, but not in a way that used his name for sympathy. She was careful about that. Careful not to let his story become the frame that excused hers. It said, in plain, unadorned language, that she had judged a man by his appearance and had him removed from her company. That this incident was not an aberration, but a visible symptom of how she had run Evercrest for years, and that she took full personal responsibility for the culture that had made it possible. She read it one final time before releasing it, sitting alone in her office at 11 at night, and her hand hovered over the send button for a long moment, because Gerald had warned her, honestly, that the coverage would be brutal, that competitors would use it against her for years, that some of her own investors might quietly walk. She pressed send anyway. The reaction, when it came, was everything Nathan had told her to expect, and worse in some ways, and better in others than she'd braced for. Business commentators picked it apart on television the next morning. Ad. A rival CEO made a pointed needling comment in an interview about leaders who confuse a press release with actual reform. Ad. Her name trended briefly, attached to a wave of commentary that ranged from genuine anger to cruel mockery to ad. Occasionally, ad. Something that looked almost like grudging respect for the fact that she hadn't hidden behind lawyers. Her mother called that evening, having seen it on the local news in Ohio, and Victoria braced herself for the conversation, certain it would be painful. Vicky, her mother said, and her voice was thick. I read it 3 times. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have called you before it went out. I didn't want you to find out from... Stop, her mother said gently. I'm not calling because I'm upset. I'm calling because I don't think I've ever been more proud of you in my whole life, and I needed to say it before I lost my nerve. That's the little girl. That's her right there, in every sentence of that thing you wrote. I don't know how you found her again, but you did, and I needed you to know that your father would have been proud too. Victoria cried on the phone for the second time in 2 weeks, and this time it didn't feel like grief. It felt like something closer to relief. 3 weeks after Nathan Whitmore had been thrown out of a conference room by a security guard, the deal closed. $400 million moved into Evercrest's accounts. The board approved it unanimously, Gerald Voss casting his vote with what Victoria could have sworn was the faintest hint of a smile. 4,000 employees kept their jobs, and the company sent out an internal memo written not by Priscilla's team, but personally reviewed line by line by Victoria herself, explaining what had happened, what had changed, and what employees could expect going forward, including a formal, permanent channel for the kind of concerns that had spent 11 years dying quietly in Walter's silence. Victoria didn't celebrate. She'd expected, on the day the wire transfer cleared, to feel something like triumph, the old familiar rush of having won. Instead, she felt something quieter and stranger, something closer to the exhausted, tender relief of a person who has survived a surgery she badly needed, and knows the healing is only just beginning. That evening her phone rang. It was Nathan. I saw the statement, he said without preamble. And I read the 50 interview notes Gerald's sent over. At my request, I hope you don't mind. I wanted to see them for myself, rather than take anyone's word for it. Victoria's stomach tightened. And I think, Nathan said slowly, that you did exactly what I asked you to do. And you did it without softening a single one of the hard parts, which is more than I expected, if I'm honest. I've watched a lot of people go through a process like this and quietly find ways to make it easier on themselves. You didn't do that. Not once, as far as I can tell. It didn't feel like there was an easier version available, Victoria said. Or maybe there was, and I was too afraid of you finding out to take it. Nathan laughed, a short, genuine sound she hadn't heard from him before. Whatever the reason, the result's the same, a pause. Lily's been asking about you, by the way. I told her about the woman who apologized to a security guard, and she wanted to know if you were the same lady from the story I've been telling her at bedtime, the one about the man in the cheap shoes. What did you tell her? I told her yes, Nathan said. And I told her the story isn't finished yet. She said she wants to meet you and decide for herself whether you're one of the good guys. I'd like that, Victoria said, and meant it more than she'd meant almost anything in years. I have a feeling her opinion is going to matter to me more than the board's did. It should, Nathan said. She's a better judge of character than most street, and she doesn't care one bit what shoes you're wearing when you show up. Another pause. Warmer this time. Come by Saturday. Bring nothing. Wear whatever you'd wear on an ordinary day, nothing special, nothing performed. Let her see you the way you actually are, because that's the only version of you she'll bother remembering anyway. Victoria agreed, and hung up, and sat for a long moment in the quiet of her apartment, looking out at a city she had spent 19 years trying to conquer and had only now, in the wreckage of nearly losing everything, begun to actually see. She thought about Marcus's kids, Jaden in 3rd grade and Maya just starting kindergarten. She thought about Walter, 11 years of silence finally broken. She thought about a security guard's patient, unhurried dignity in the face of an order that should never have been given. She thought about a girl in Ohio with a hole in her shoe, and the version of herself that had once cried because she couldn't bring herself to laugh. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Victoria Hale did not feel like a woman who had narrowly avoided catastrophe. She felt like a woman who had, almost by accident, been given the chance to become someone worth being. Saturday came gray and cool. The kind of morning that made Victoria second-guess the plain sweater she'd chosen twice before finally leaving it on. Telling herself, out loud, in her empty apartment, that a woman who wanted to become someone new didn't get to keep dressing like the old one out of habit. Nathan's house was exactly what she expected by now. Having spent 3 weeks learning who he actually was underneath the story the world told about him. Modest, a normal street, normal neighbors, a basketball hoop bolted crookedly over the garage door that had clearly been put up by a father with more love than carpentry skill. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment before she rang the bell and found that her hands were shaking slightly, and understood that she was more nervous standing in front this ordinary house than she had been standing in his office, with $400 million on the line. The door opened before she reached the bell, and there she was, Lily Whitmore, 8 years old, pigtails slightly crooked, wearing a t-shirt with a dinosaur on it and an expression of frank, unguarded assessment that made Victoria feel, for one disorienting second, exactly like she'd felt walking into that conference room weeks ago. Except this time she was the one being looked at. Are you the shoe lady? Lily asked. Victoria blinked. I'm sorry, the what? Daddy told me a story about a lady who was mean to him because of his shoes, and then she felt really bad about it and became nicer. Are you her? Somewhere behind Lily, in the front hallway, Nathan appeared, and Victoria caught the look on his face, half amused, half wincing, entirely helpless in the way every parent looks when a child says the true thing loud in front of company. Lily, he said, we talked about. It's fine, Victoria said, and found that she meant it, and found something loosening in her chest at the sheer, uncomplicated honesty of the question. She crouched down the way she'd seen Nathan do in that magazine photograph, so she was closer to the girl's eye level. Yes, I'm her. I was mean to your dad because of his shoes, and it was wrong, and I've been trying very hard to be a different kind of person ever since. Lily considered this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. Did you say sorry? I did. To him and to a man named Marcus who works at my company, and to a lot of other people too. Did they forgive you? Some of them are still deciding, Victoria said honestly. I think that's fair. I think it takes longer to earn trust back than it takes to lose it. Lily nodded slowly. Like this matched something she already understood about the world. And then, without any further ceremony, she reached out and took Victoria's hand and said, okay, you can come in. I was going to show Daddy my school project, but you can see it too if you want. And that was that. Victoria Hale, who had spent 19 years deciding who was worth her time in a matter of seconds, had just been assessed and approved by an 8-year-old in under a minute, and she felt something in that small verdict that no board vote, no closed deal, no headline had given her in years. She felt like she'd actually earned something. The school project turned out to be a diorama of the solar system made from a shoebox and painted styrofoam balls, and Victoria sat on the living room floor for the better part of an hour, listening to Lily explain, with tremendous confidence and only occasional accuracy, which planet was which and why Pluto didn't count anymore, even though she personally thought that was unfair. Nathan made coffee in the kitchen and brought out a plate of cookies that were, he admitted, from a package rather than homemade, and the three of them sat together in a house with no marble, no glass walls, no assistant hovering with a tablet, and Victoria understood, somewhere in the middle of Lily's very serious explanation of Saturn's rings, that this was the first genuinely peaceful hour she'd had in longer than she could remember. Can I ask you something? Lily said eventually, apropos of nothing, the directness of children arriving without warning. Of course. Are you going to be mean to people again, or is it fixed now? Victoria looked at Nathan briefly, and saw that he wasn't going to rescue her from the question, that he was watching with the same quiet attentiveness he brought to everything, waiting to see what she'd say. I don't think it works like a broken toy that gets fixed once and then stays fixed forever, Victoria said carefully. I think it's more like every day I have to choose again. To notice people. To be kind even when it's not going to get me anything. Some days I'll probably still get it wrong. But I'm trying to build a life where getting it wrong bothers me enough that I keep trying to get it right. Does that make sense? Lily thought about it. That's what Daddy says about practicing piano. You don't get good once. You have to keep doing it. That's exactly it, Victoria said, and felt something in her chest that was almost too large for the moment, and had to look down at the shoebox solar system for a second to keep her composure. The months that followed were not easy, and Victoria had known, from that very first afternoon in Nathan's office, that they wouldn't be. Rebuilding a company's culture, she learned quickly, was nothing like closing a deal. There was no single signature, no clean moment of completion. It was slow, granular, exhausting work, made up of 1,000 small choices repeated over and over until they started, gradually, to feel like character instead of performance. The operating committee didn't dissolve after the 90 days Nathan had originally specified. Somewhere around month 4, Victoria asked the board to make it permanent, restructured slightly, with rotating seats so that different employees, from different levels, would cycle through it every year. Gerald Voss, presenting the proposal on her behalf, told the rest of the board it was the single best piece of governance he'd seen in his 30 years in business, and Victoria, sitting in the room, found she no longer needed to hear that kind of praise to know it was true. That itself felt like progress, the quieting of the part of her that had always needed the room's approval to feel real. Walter, the employee who'd stopped bringing ideas 11 years earlier, came back to her 6 months in with a proposal he'd apparently been sitting on, unspoken, since before Victoria had even become CEO. It was a smart one, a genuine efficiency in how the company handled a piece of its supply chain that nobody younger and louder had ever thought to look at, because nobody younger and louder had been there long enough to see the pattern. Victoria implemented it within the quarter, publicly credited him by name in the company-wide memo, and watched, in the weeks after, as 3 other longtime employees who'd gone quiet years ago started speaking up again in meetings, tentatively at first, testing whether the new atmosphere was real or just another passing initiative. It was real. She made sure of that, deliberately, every single week, because she understood by now that trust rebuilt in an afternoon could be lost again in an afternoon too, if she ever let herself get lazy about it. Denise, from customer support, whose 11 ignored complaints Victoria had read aloud to the board, with her own voice shaking, was promoted 8 months later to head an entirely new department, one focused specifically on internal culture and employee experience, reporting directly to Victoria, with real budget and real authority, not the toothless HR liaison role that had swallowed her complaints for years without a trace. I want you to know, Victoria told her, the day she offered her the job, that I'm not doing this because it looks good. I'm doing it because you spent 3 years trying to tell this company something true. And this company failed you 11 separate times, and I don't ever want that to be possible again on my watch. You understand what that failure looks like from the inside better than anyone I could hire from outside. That's not a consolation prize. That's the actual qualification. Denise cried in her office that day, and so quietly, did Victoria, and neither of them apologized for it. Marcus, for his part, became something Victoria hadn't expected and hadn't planned for a genuine friend, in the loose, easy way that grows between 2 people who've been honest with each other at a difficult moment. She learned his last name, Delgado. She learned that Jaden, his son, was struggling a little in math, and one Tuesday, without any grand gesture attached to it, she quietly arranged for the company's education benefit, a modest tutoring stipend. Most employees didn't even know existed, because nobody had ever bothered to advertise it properly to actually reach him. She didn't announce it. She didn't put out a memo. She just made sure it happened. The way a person does something because it's right, and not because someone is watching. Which was, she understood now, the entire distinction Nathan had been trying to teach her from the very beginning. David Chen, the young executive whose courage in going to Gerald had started the whole reckoning, was promoted twice in the following year, and Victoria made sure everyone at the company understood exactly why, not for loyalty, not for flattery, but for having told her an uncomfortable truth, when it would have been far easier and far safer to say nothing. You could have stayed quiet, she told him once, over a coffee that had become a semi-regular check-in between them. Nobody would have blamed you. And I want you to know, I understand that going to Gerald could have ended your career here if things had gone differently. If I'd been a different kind of person, it would have. I thought about that, David admitted. For about an hour, honestly, before I called him. But I kept thinking about 4,000 people, and I thought if this company goes under, because nobody had the nerve to say the hard thing out loud, I don't want to be one of the people who stayed quiet. I'd rather lose my job telling the truth than keep it by staying silent. That's rarer than you think, Victoria said. I spent 19 years building a company where almost nobody had that kind of nerve, and I never once understood what it was costing me until I nearly lost everything because of it. She thought often, in those months, about the version of herself that had sat across the conference table from Nathan Whitmore and refused to shake his hand. She didn't hate that woman. Exactly, she'd come to understand slowly. In long conversations with a therapist she'd finally started seeing. That hating the old version of herself wasn't the same thing as changing. That shame without understanding just curdled into more of the same defensiveness that had built the wall in the first place. What she felt instead was something closer to a clear-eyed, unflinching recognition. That woman had existed. That woman had been real. Had been built out of real fear. A fifth grader's fear of ending up back in the pile marked "doesn't matter." Dressed up over decades into something that looked like strength and had actually been armor all along. She didn't need to hate her. She needed to keep choosing not to be her every single day, the way Nathan had told Lily about piano. A year to the week after the morning Nathan Whitmore had been walked out of a conference room by a security guard. Evercrest Technologies held its annual company gathering, not the stiff, catered affair it had been in years past. Held in a rented hotel ballroom with a stage and a teleprompter, but something Victoria had redesigned from the ground up with input from the operating committee. It was held in the company's own largest open floor. Tables pushed back. Food brought in from local places the employees had actually voted on. No assigned seating, no hierarchy of who sat closest to the front. Victoria stood near the back for most of it. Deliberately. Talking to people rather than being talked at. And it was there, near the drinks table, that she saw Nathan arrive. He came the way he always came, unannounced, unassuming, wearing a sweater rather than a suit, no entourage, nothing that marked him as the man whose $400 million had kept this entire room employed. He scanned the crowd for a moment, and Victoria watched something in her own body respond before her mind had fully caught up: a warmth, an eagerness, an impulse that a year ago would have been buried under calculation about how the interaction might look to other people in the room. She didn't wait for him to find her. She walked straight to him, the way she had once, on principle, refused to walk toward anyone who couldn't immediately do something for her, and she extended her hand. "Nathan Whitmore," she said. "Thank you for coming." And this time he took it. Immediately, warmly, without the deliberate pause he'd made her sit with in that conference room a year earlier, because there was nothing left to test. He'd been watching quietly, from a distance, for 12 months, reading the interviews, reading Gerald's reports, hearing, through Claire, the small unremarkable details that told the real story better than any headline could, a promotion for Denise, a tutoring stipend for a security guard's son, a company gathering redesigned around the people who actually worked there instead of the people who liked it to be seen running it. "You're welcome," Nathan said. "I wouldn't have missed it." They stood together for a moment, watching the room. Marcus laughing with a group of engineers near the food table, his daughter Maya, now in first grade, sitting on his shoulders because he'd been allowed, for the first time in 6 years, to bring his kids to a company event. Walter deep in conversation with 2 younger employees who were asking him, genuinely, about something from his 11 quiet years that had turned out to matter after all. David Chen standing near the stage, no longer anxious about whether telling the truth would cost him anything. "I have to admit something to you," Nathan said, still watching the room. "When I walked into that conference room last year, I'd already decided, before you called security, That there was maybe a 30% chance I'd end up investing in this company at all, regardless of how the meeting went. The finances were shaky enough that I wasn't sure the fundamentals justified it. What tipped it, what actually made me walk through that door in the first place, even suspecting how it might go, was that I wanted to see, with my own eyes, who was running it. Because I've learned, over 20 years, that the numbers tell you what a company is doing. But how the leader treats the person she thinks doesn't matter, tells you what it's going to become. And what did you see? Victoria asked, though she already knew the answer, had known it since the moment security walked him out. I saw exactly what I was afraid I'd see, Nathan said. Which is why I nearly walked away and never looked back. I want you to understand that, Victoria, I mean this sincerely, not as a lecture. 99 times out of 100, that's exactly what happens. I see the contempt, I walk, and the person never even understands what they lost, because nobody ever tells them, and even if someone did, most people aren't built to actually hear it. He turned to look at her directly. You were the one time in 20 years someone chased me across the country and told me the truth about what they'd shown me, instead of trying to talk their way around it. That's the only reason we're standing here. Victoria felt her throat tighten. I think about that morning almost every day, she admitted. Not with the shame I felt at first, that's mostly gone now, or at least it doesn't sit on my chest the way it used to. But I think about it more like a hinge. Like the whole rest of my life swings on that one morning. And I got lucky, genuinely lucky, that the man I threw out was patient enough, and generous enough, to come back and show me who I'd become instead of just walking away and letting me find out the hard way, alone, when it was already too late to fix anything. It wasn't luck, Nathan said. Or it was luck that I happened to be the one standing there. But everything after that was you. I've watched a lot of people get a wake-up call like the one you got. Most of them hit snooze. You didn't. That's not luck, Victoria. That's character. The kind you apparently had buried under 19 years of armor, but it was always going to be there when someone finally cracked the armor open. I just happened to be the one holding the hammer that morning. They were quiet for a moment, watching Lily, who had come with him, and had immediately abandoned the adults in favor of showing Marcus's daughter Maya her drawing of the solar system. The two of them now sprawled on the floor near the windows, comparing which planet was better, entirely unbothered by the fact that one of their fathers had almost lost a fortune, and the other's employer had almost lost a company over a decision made in less time than it took to boil an egg. Can I tell you what I think the real lesson is? Victoria said. Not the one that goes in the press release. The real one. Please. I used to think respect was something you gave to people based on what they could do for you. Victoria said slowly, working it out as she spoke, the way she'd learned to do in a year of therapy sessions, and 50 honest conversations, and one impossible public statement. That was the whole architecture of how I moved through the world. I sorted people, instantly, into categories: useful, not useful, and I gave my attention accordingly, and I called it efficiency, and I called it being a good judge of value, I called it business sense. And what I understand now is that it wasn't sense at all. It was fear, dressed up to look like strategy. I was still that 5th grade girl terrified of ending up in the pile marked doesn't matter. And the only way I knew how to make sure I never landed there again was to be the one deciding who did. Nathan listened without interrupting. The same patient stillness she'd first mistaken, a year ago, for weakness. But respect that only shows up when someone might be useful to you isn't respect at all, Victoria went on. It's just self-interest wearing a nicer coat. Real respect, the kind that actually means something, the kind that tells you who a person truly is, only shows itself when there's nothing to gain. When the person in front of you can't advance your career, can't sign a check, can't do a single thing for you except exist. That's the only test that matters. And I failed it, completely, for 19 years, without ever once realizing I was even being tested. And now? Nathan asked quietly. Victoria looked out at the room, at Mark, at Walter, at Denise, at David, at 2 little girls comparing planets on the floor, none of whom owed her anything anymore, all of whom she'd finally learned to actually see. Now I try to pass it every single day, she said. Not because anyone's watching. That was always the trap, wasn't it? Being kind, because someone important might notice. I try to pass it, especially when nobody's watching, because that's the only version of the test that actually counts. Nathan smiled the same genuine smile she'd first seen cross his face in that second-hand office chair a year earlier. The smile of a man who had asked the hardest question he knew how to ask and finally, after 20 years of watching people fail it, gotten an answer that held. That, he said, is the whole thing. That's the entire lesson right there. You just said it better than I ever have. And I've been trying to explain it to people for 2 decades. They stood together a while longer. Not saying much. Simply watching a room full of people who, a year earlier, had worked in fear and silence. Now laughing, talking, sharing food they'd chosen themselves. Treated every one of them. From the newest hire to the man who checked badges at the front desk like they mattered. Because they did. They always had. It had simply taken one catastrophic, humiliating, life-altering morning for the person at the top to finally understand it. Later that evening, after most of the company had gone home, Victoria found herself alone for a moment near the windows, looking out over the same city she'd once believed she needed to conquer, one relationship at a time, one refused handshake at a time, in order to prove she'd never again be the girl with the hole in her shoe. She thought about her mother, back in Ohio, who called every week now instead of 4 times a year, who had told her, just the week before, that she sounded like herself again, not the polished, armored voice Victoria had used on the phone for the better part of 2 decades, but something closer to the voice she'd had as a girl, before she'd learned that softness was something the world would use against her. She thought about Katie Kaminsky, the girl from 5th grade with the hole in her shoe, whom Victoria had tried quietly, through a private investigator she'd hired without telling anyone, to find and had found, eventually, living 2 states away, working as a school teacher, married, with children of her own. Victoria had written her a letter, a real one, handwritten, admitting what she remembered from that cafeteria 30 years earlier, apologizing not for anything dramatic she'd done, but for every single time she'd stood silently by and let someone else's cruelty happen in front of her without lifting a finger to stop it. She hadn't expected a reply. She'd gotten one anyway, 3 sentences. Gracious. More forgiving than Victoria felt she deserved. Ending with the line, I don't remember that day the way you do. But I remember you never joined in, and at the time that mattered more than you probably know. She'd cried reading that letter for an hour, and then she'd folded it carefully and kept it in the drawer of her desk, not as a trophy of her own redemption, but as a reminder the kind Nathan had told her she'd need, the kind no single apology or public statement could ever replace that grace, once received, had to be paid forward every day, in small and unglamorous ways, or it curdled right back into the same forgetting that had built the wall in the first place. Nathan found her by the window, Lily asleep against his shoulder, worn out from an evening of planetary debates and cookies. Heading out, he said quietly. Long day for this one. Thank you for coming, Victoria said. Both of you. It meant more than you probably know. I have a pretty good idea, Nathan said, and glanced down at his sleeping daughter, and then back up at Victoria, and something passed between them that didn't need any more words, the quiet, hard-won understanding of 2 people who had each, in their own way, learned the same brutal lesson about who they were capable of becoming if nobody ever stopped them, and had each, against the odds, managed to stop themselves in time. For what it's worth, Nathan added, shifting Lily gently against his shoulder as he turned to go, I don't make this kind of bet very often. The bet on a person, I mean, not the money's easy, comparatively. But every so often somebody proves the bet was worth making. You did that. I hope you know it. He left and Victoria stood alone by the window a while longer, watching the lights of the city she no longer needed to conquer, only to belong to honestly one relationship at a time, one small kindness at a time, one ordinary unwitnessed choice at a time, for as long as she had left to make them. Because in the end, that was the entire truth the whole ordeal had carved into her, plain and permanent as a scar, A person's real character was never announced in the boardroom. Ad. Never printed on a business card. Ad. Never measured by the size of a check or the cut of a suit. It was written, quietly and completely, in how they treated the ones who could never pay them back. And the woman who once refused a stranger's handshake over a pair of cheap shoes had finally, at unbearable cost, learned to offer her hand first to everyone, every time, without needing to know in advance whether it would ever be worth her while. Ad. That in the end was the whole story. And it was, at long last, the truest thing Victoria Hale had ever built.